Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Jake Burhans. Thank you for being here, Jake.
Thank you, Aaron. I couldn't not be on a podcast called Keep Hustling. I absolutely love it.
It's a lifestyle. It's a mindset. You're a true hustler. So really thank you for being here. I got to ask, where you look like it's warm weather. Where are you located?
I am located in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I actually moved down here 4 months ago from the not warm weather of New Hampshire. And it's been absolutely tremendous to be down here. So it's been great. It's actually been pretty cold. It's been like 50s. So been hitting life a little bit, but we'll get back up there to the 70s, 80s soon.
Yeah. You get those people who they hit one cold spurt in Florida and they turn on their heat for the first time in like 6 years and they get that horrible smell and they think their whole house is burning down. But whatever.
Yeah.
You don't have that problem here in New York. It goes on even when there's no snow. We get that all the time.
Yeah.
So you said, how could you not be on a podcast called Keep Hustling?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? Why?
Well, I think hustle is everything. Going back to one of my favorite quotes, one of them of all time, is being able to do the consistently basic thing for an uncommonly long period of time without convincing yourself you're smarter than you are. I think hustling, some of the less intelligent people, quote unquote intelligent people, make it so much farther in business. Why is that? Because I think they don't overthink things, right? Business tactically is so simple. It's just people vastly underestimate the quantity of things you need to do to make it, right? Like in my industry, real estate investing, right? How many cold calls do you need to make to get a deal, right? I actually broke down the numbers. If you're cold calling, you need to make about 3,000 dials, 300 conversations to get one deal. Right now, if people come up to me, Jake, I made 50 dials, man, I didn't get a deal. This doesn't work. Like 50 dials, that's not even a drop in the bucket. Like, great job taking action, right? Do that every day, 50 dials. Let's work up to getting 50 conversations in a day, right? But 50 dials is great. But man, you got to have 3,000 dials, right? 3,000 dials. So we got to stay consistent here, right? So I think the mindset of hustling is great. I also think it's a season in your life of hustle, right? When you're building a business or you're doing something, it's a season and it's not forever, because it's tough when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting your business and you're in that hustle season, you're grinding, you're working 10, 11 hours a day, 12 hours a day. Sometimes it feels like there's no light, but there is a light. I can promise you. I'm starting to see the light actually right now. So hopefully get out of the hustle season, hire some people and get going.
Well, I would say, not to correct you, but I think that it's a different hustle. Meaning your hustle can evolve. And the idea of keep hustling doesn't mean you do the same thing for 40 years. But I think one of the things that you're really tapping into, which is so true. I mean, when I started this podcast, someone sent me a statistic that like 95% of the podcasts out there don't get past 3 episodes and like 80% don't get past 1. So the fact that we've made it is something that, because I committed to doing it. But I think that when a person earlier on in their career, when they're in that real grind of a hustle, if you set the foundation to doing those things, I mean, there's endless opportunities then and in the future. And I think that's really what hustling's about. I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you heard this quote. I'm a big quote guy. I think it was Kenny Smith who said it, that the difference between champions and average athletes are that champions do consistently what the average people do for a short period of time.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about, yeah, it is true. But a lot of times it's the basic things. Like you think about Kobe Bryant, like you'd hear about him getting in the gym and doing I don't know anything about basketball as a hockey player, but he would do like a little pivot, right? And he'd do it freaking 2,000 times at 3 a.m. in the morning. You know what I mean? But it's like, you think he'd be out there doing all like the fancy, like spinoramas, like layups. No, he's in there doing his pivots 2,000 times.
So how many people would say that, okay, when I was not a professional athlete or when I was in high school, college, I was able to do, as you're talking about cold calls, 500 reps. Okay, so that makes me average. The champion, the Kobe Bryant, the Michael Jordan, those elite people, how many golf shots has Tiger Woods taken? We can't
Yeah.
even imagine how many golf shots Tiger Woods has taken in his life.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who keeps doing that, who keeps hustling, who keeps doing that, that's what makes a champion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keep hustling to me is all about. So
I love that.
First, everyone, I usually end the episode of this, but I'm going to lead with this. And that is everybody needs to follow Jake on all the social media platforms. We connected recently. The Instagram, I'm a big Instagram reel consumer. I'm not a TikTok consumer. Really great stuff. You did a whole deep dive into cold calling and things like that. So everyone should follow you and everyone will see your incredible hustle and the businesses that you're building. But let's take it back. Take us to the start. What do we need to know about your upbringing that led you to that extreme hustle that's made its way to Florida today?
That's a good question. I mean, I think everyone can do it, right? Everyone can be an entrepreneur. I think certain people have certain characteristics that they're going to want to hustle more than others. My parents were teachers, so it wasn't like I was born into business or anything like that. We never had a ton of money. So I think initially getting into it, wanting to have money, which obviously, now is only a portion of it, right? Obviously, if you don't want to be financially stressed out. So money is important, but I think it started a lot from hockey, right? And all the lessons and values I learned from hockey. And looking back now, I never would have thought I'd look back at it like this, but having the commitment to play hockey at the highest level from when I was a young kid all the way up to about 20 years old, right? Training year round. I did it almost as like a full-time job for a little bit. But those values and the disciplines you get from that are so applicable to entrepreneurship and life, right? Being persistent, being committed, being a good teammate, being honest and truthful with your teammates, right? Having each other's backs, doing these things really teaches you a lot and really transferable. But I think a lot of those values have transferred over and allowed me to continue to hustle because I had to do that as an athlete,
And yeah, not to get back to what we were talking about before, but I think that sports is like the ultimate vision of that, because you can, as a young kid, you can see, obviously there are people that are naturally gifted athletes, but if you look at the people who you played hockey with in your 20s, I would bet most of them were not naturally gifted athletes. But it's the ones who say, I obviously didn't play at that level, but in my own way, I was a relatively serious basketball player for a 5'7", guy from New York. But it was always interesting that at the end of every summer, when we come back to school and get back into the school leagues, you could tell who just didn't hone the craft, didn't work out, didn't care about those things. And those are the people who didn't make it further, because eventually size is only going to get you so far. Strength is only going to get you so far. Natural ability is only going to get you so far. Well, how high did you get in the, where'd you get in the hockey world?
No, I mean, I played. So after high school, you go to a league called junior hockey, which is like what you need to do before you go to college. I ended up getting hurt, so I didn't play in school. But like the kids I grew up with playing are like in the NHL, like in high school. I played prep school in New Hampton or up in New Hampshire. So I mean, those kids are like literally in the NHL. So at that age, obviously not trying to glorify the high school days, but at that age, I was playing with some of the top people in the country, right? But just as I progressed, ended up getting hurt and I kind of burnt out on the whole thing. That's a whole nother story. I just put way too much time and effort into it and I should have played other sports, but, anyways.
Can I ask you about a portion of that?
Mm-hmm.
So you are a committed high school athlete. You're 15, 16, 17 years old, and then you got hurt. And yet now you're still talking about how that inspired your hustle.
Mm-hmm.
How did that not deter your hustle? How did you keep that portion of your life and not get down by the fact that it ended relatively abruptly?
It was an interesting transition because ever since you're young, it's like any professional athlete, you want to go to the pros, right? Everyone wants to go to the pros. So you're putting in everything you possibly can. And I just remember being just like a lot of times the only kid who would never miss the workout, right? Or never do this. But I think one of the biggest things was just finding something else, right? I mean, for a year after I stopped, I went to school and I was like lost for a year. I was like, what do I do? Like my whole life revolved around hockey. Because when you play junior hockey, I was up in Canada. I was like north of Toronto. But that's all you do essentially. It's like a full-time job. You wake up, you live with like a billet family who's like a fan of the team. You go live with them. You're like 18 years old. And you just wake up, train, watch film, do the things. You're like doing community service, and then you're just playing hockey, right? So that's all you're doing. So filling that void is like pretty significant. Now here I am, freshman year in college. For one, I'm 20 years old and making cookies in the freaking dorm lounge. I'm like, what am I doing? And so I went from doing that, and like I used to work construction in the summers and stuff, so like real life stuff. Then went to college, I was like, what am I doing right now? But I think for that year, I was kind of lost. But then I got into business and finance, and did a little bit of stock stuff. But the stock stuff never really stuck with me because I was like, okay, like I can invest, but it doesn't make sense for me. So I have to invest, but I have to wait till I'm 70 to be rich. It's like something about that just didn't really land with me. So then I eventually read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's when I was like, okay, this is what's going to replace hockey, right? So it was tough at first. And there was a space from when I stopped playing hockey to when I found something else that I could just hustle towards, and fill that space for me.
But I think there is something really there when it was ingrained in you. You just had to find how to manifest it again. Whereas a person who doesn't grow up with anything of discipline, it doesn't have to be sports. It could be an instrument. It could be art. It could be anything that they're into. It could be diving really into a subject in school. If you didn't have that muscle memory of like, when I find that thing that I'm super passionate about, I know that I can do it every single day for 5 years or 10 years because that's what I do with hockey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I love the fact that you went back to that when I asked you about what inspired your hustle from your upbringing, because that really is the core. That's what got you to where you are today. So I want to ask you.
I think real quick on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one more thing. I think as a kid too, not being given things, like you can't be given things. You're going to have no hustle, no drive. Right. And I think I've never been a parent, but I've been a kid. And I think parents and it's natural, right? Parents have nothing, become rich, right? Want to give it to their kids because they never had it. Most detrimental thing you can give to your kids is everything, right? Because then they're not going to go out and hustle. They have no idea how to work, right? From when I was 14 years old, I was working construction. I was literally in the trenches, legitimate dirt trenches, digging holes. 14 years old on top of playing hockey and doing all these things. So like I learned the value of what it means to work and all these things. And eventually when I was sitting in an office, I was like, holy crap, this is great. I don't have to dig for a living. So having those experiences, I think as a kid and working really hard is going to make you respect working, right? And really drive you to try to get to that level that you need to be at to live like a comfortable life.
100%. And it's so interesting that you say that. This is going to be the episode with the most quotes in it. So we're just going to get them all out there.
Yep.
But another one that I love, I'm sure you've heard before, is strong people create good times. Good times create weak people. And weak people create bad times. And bad times difficult times create strong people. And that's the cycle. So it's interesting how you said, the people who develop the wealth, they give it to their kids don't hustle as much.
And the cadence is,
yeah, go ahead.
The cadence is almost like generationally too, I think.
Yeah. So that's what, and it's, I was brought up in a family business. And one of the things that my parents were very strict about was like, you have to earn the respect and you have to do the work. And I remember one summer I was living in my parents' house and I was working here at the company. And I asked my dad when we were going to work that day. He asked me what time I was waking up the next day. I said, oh, when are we leaving for work? He says, oh, I'm leaving at 8:30 because if I hit traffic on the bus or going down, I can be in there after 9. You are going to leave before that so that you're not late. And that was, part of, I think that I feel lucky because I think you're right. A lot of those things are challenging. And I think that a lot of people think that they're creating a better life for their kids when really they might be. That doesn't mean that if a parent grows up and they are in a house where they can't afford food, their kid should not have food. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that there's a different level of being able to, what is it? Shaq says, in order to touch my cheese, you got to bring me 3 degrees or something like that.
Yeah,
same kind of thing. Wow, these quotes are flowing today. So then you found your passion in the real estate business. I assume you're a cold calling guru because that's what you said. But take us to the pivotal moment where you were like, "This is what I want to do, or this is going to click, and this is the career path for me to inspire my hustle."
Yeah, I think it was in. I mean, it was in college when I read that Rich Dad Poor Dad book. I mean, it's the most cliche answer ever. Everyone reads that little purple book, right? And people either, oh my gosh, or it doesn't hit for them, right? I'll give it to some people and they'll be like, like you read the book? Yeah, I read it. Nah, nothing happens for it. But some people be like, oh my God, this is it. And for me, that's what it was like. Oh my God, this is it. This is my way to get wealthy. I've always wanted to be wealthy. So then I just started reading everything, going full in. I learned about wholesaling back in 21. And it was just kind of just full bore from there. And we started out doing a lot of things, and we've whittled it down. But I think at that time, money was the main driving force for me. And this seemed like the best way to get wealthy. So that's really what it was that was driving me. Because like I said, I didn't come from any money, like from nothing. Not like poor. Like my family was always had a place to live and pretty good. It had good grandparents that were able to support us and all that. But never being like wealthy, and I don't know, that was just a motivator at first. And I saw real estate as that pathway.
So you said that was the motivator at first. What did the motivation change to, and how did that change?
Motivation changed to, I think, helping other people begin their entrepreneurial journey. Like I'm still in the beginning. Like I'm thinking long, right? I'm thinking 40 years, right? So I'm still in the infancy. But being a couple years in, I have a little bit of a step on the people who are just getting started, right? And I think Alex Hormozy said that entrepreneurship is the greatest self-development tool of all time. And I could not agree anymore. So my whole focus now is building like a real estate community on Facebook, just a free Facebook group where I'm just trying to dump as much value as I can into there and just help people on those first few steps of their entrepreneurial journey, right? I want everyone to be operating at their highest capacity, their highest function, reach their highest potential in life, right? And I think a big part of that is having people to support you, having a community, and doing all those things. So I think it's turned from money, which probably motivates a lot of people, and it still is a motivating factor, right? I'm not rich now by any means, but I think now it's switched to like helping people, because that's like what fulfills you, right? Is watching other people grow and change, and what you're saying is helping them. And like nothing feels better, man, than people texting you like, oh my gosh, thank you for this. This helped me so much, all those things. So that's what I can see myself doing long term, because I love stuff like this, podcast, preaching about mindset, doing that. That's what gets me fired up. Or
Getting
going
people
on
to
my
make more cold calls.
getting people to make more cold calls, eat more dirt. But yeah,
It's true.
I
I
mean,
mean, is there anything more gratifying? Seriously, as someone who has seen it, and you could see something or the potential in someone, and they're like, "I made 50 calls," and you're like, "Get to 500,"
mm-hmm.
and the guy or gal texts you or calls you and says, "Hey, I just made call number 489,
Mm-hmm.
and I just got the biggest deal of my life."
Yeah.
Like, and that's what motivates you to keep doing that. But I think there's also a certain level of validation there, and everybody needs validation. And I think money is a huge validating factor, but it's also just like when you develop that path, that's what hustling is about. It's finding that path and then being able to cultivate that. So in order to do that, I think a lot of people, not to get cliche about what hustle really is, but a lot of people give up on that early, and they're so close. It's almost like if you zoom out, you have a guy who's climbing a mountain and he can't see the top, but he's right there. And then 3 steps from the top, he gives up. And people never will realize how good they could have it or where their success is going to come if they don't just stay at it until they find that passion.
Yeah. And I'm still on that pathway, right? Like I've made it to a point where it's my full-time job and I'm doing fine, right? And it's great, and we're doing really well in the business. Not to the point of like retirement though, where you're just like, you got your passive income, all those things. So I'm still on that doorstep of like, oh, how close am I? Like I'm 3 feet from getting to this point, keep going. Like the people who are ahead of me are probably looking back like, man, you're almost there. You got to keep going. And I think at a certain part of it is like, when I look back at these people calling, like I've been through it. So like I know exactly where they're at. And I'm like, hey man, you just got to keep going. You just got to every day put in 2-3 hours and you will get through it. You'll get through it. But no matter how much, even for me, no matter how much someone used to tell me that, I could never it would help me. But in my head, I'm just like, man, this is so tough. But you really don't know until you make it through yourself. So you have to have that blind faith. That's what it is, blind faith. Listen to people that you know and trust that this is the process to get you to that result, and just do the process. Keep doing it. And just be around those people to be like, hey, am I doing the right thing? Yep. Keep doing it. You just got to keep going. That's why I said at the beginning, everyone vastly underestimates the quantity of work that's needed. So it's just doing the calls, right? Every single day.
And how many people, because they underestimate it, get too bogged down and then don't get there, and they could have, and it could have been easier, and in the long run. And I think that if there's anything that one of the things that we're trying to get out of this podcast is inspiring people. The tagline is getting past the why to the how. Everyone likes to talk about their why, and that's their North Star, and that's what motivates you. But how? When someone listens to Jake and they're like, hey, this guy, he was a hockey player. It didn't work out for him. He read a book. He chased it down. He spent 5-6 years perfecting, figuring out which part of the business was best for him while hustling it through, found the thing he's good at, and now is going to become a billionaire. Like that person who's in one of those seasons in their life will gain tremendously from that impact. And I think that that's really what it's about, is getting to that moment and getting to that point.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in getting to the how. One of the biggest things I learned last year, I would say probably mindset wise, is everyone has their own unique set of circumstances and position in life, right? So you can never really truly compare yourself to someone else because they have different characteristics, different resources. They started in a different position. So it's hard to compare yourself exactly to people. One of the biggest mistakes I did is I would look at someone that I look up to that's in my space, and I would try to emulate them 100%, be the exact same person that they are. And then things wouldn't work out and I'd get down on myself. Then I'd find another person. Okay, he's successful. I have to do exactly what he's doing. Exactly. So I do everything he does. And just certain parts about it don't work out with me. But now I've realized I'm my own person, right? Own traits, own situation, own tools in my tool belt. I just need to take bits and pieces of everyone, put it onto my superhero, for lack of a better term, and do my own thing, right? I think that's the best way to look at these because there's so much information. There's just too much information out there. That's the issue, right? Too much information that people don't even know where to go. They can't even make the call because there's 15 million people telling them how to make a cold call. You know what I mean? So I think taking the bits and pieces and always taking action, that's the how. How do you get past the why to the how? Always take action every single day. There should be a rule that, hey, I have to call for 2 hours before I can even listen to a podcast, right? If you're in real estate and you're trying to make sure you're taking action every single day and have that be a barrier to you being able to consume information, because you'll get caught in that trap of just consuming and not actually doing anything.
So that's fascinating. You're talking a lot about mindset and how to not, but how, so are you saying that you should do enough research early on that you find the mentor, even if you don't speak to them directly, but the path or the roadmap that you want to follow, and then just stay on that because too many people jump ship? Or are you saying try to grab a bunch and create your own?
I'm saying, for one, you need to take a little bits and pieces of everyone. But I'm just saying, in terms of, you said the tagline is getting behind the why to the how. I think it was 2 different points. My second point was getting beyond the why is always being able to take action and still consuming that information, but always taking action. And yeah, I just think don't get distracted by trying to learn what everyone's saying before you take action, because you're never going to actually take the action. But while you are learning, it's great. Take bits and pieces from different people, because everyone has a different style.
Got it. Do you have a mind? I love your content on mindset and all that stuff. Do you have a hustler mindset hack? What's your number one, like how to train it, how to get it, how to bring it back, how to bring your mindset back if it's drifting? Give our listeners a little tip.
Hustler mindset hack, I would say, that's a good one. I think the biggest thing is, I haven't dropped this reel, but I'm about to, but it's not about doing what you feel like. It's about doing what you need to, right? It's not about doing what you feel like, right? And I think one of the biggest things of hustle, it's about discipline, not motivation, right? Everyone's, motivational clips. Not about motivation, right? Joe Rogan talks about this. Motivation is fleeting. You go to a seminar, I'm fired up for that night or for the next day, and then it's gone. It's about discipline, knowing what you need to do and getting up every day and doing it. That's the mindset every day, right? I don't feel like doing stuff 85% of the time. I don't feel like doing it, making the calls or doing anything, but I know it's what I need to do to get to where I want to go. So just think about that. It's not about what you feel like doing, right? It's not about your emotions, really. It's not what you feel like doing. It's about what you need to do to get the results you want. If you can think about that, it's going to push you to go. Because just because you don't feel like that, that's completely normal. I can guarantee you that. Everyone feels like that.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes people get bogged down with, as you said, trying to get too many things in. So it's almost like, you go to a seminar, you hear you listen to a clip, you do whatever. Find that one thing that you can do for the next 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
Not don't take 50 pages of notes, because you take 50 pages of notes, you get back to your office, you're like, this is too difficult. As opposed to you come back with that one thing, like, I can do that one thing. I can double my cold call output because I heard Jake on stage and he said, if you do X number of calls, you'll see the success. So I think you're right. I think that it's about finding those things and just doing them. Just do it until you just do it. And that's it.
Yeah, I think taking one item and doing it until it's maybe a habit, right? I mean, James Clear, right? Or what's his name? Atomic Habits, the book Atomic Habits. They talk about habit stacking, right? It's doing one thing, do it a bunch, and then once it's a habit, then you start the next thing, right? I'm honestly the biggest culprit of that. I'll try to do like 3 different things at once and it never works. Never works. Like, I'm going to start doing all these 4 different things. I'm adding it to my routine and none of them last. But if I can sit there and do one thing every single day for 2-3 months, but it goes back to that quote, man, got to be able to do the consistently basic thing without, for an uncommonly long period of time. That's just what it's about.
And that's, and the ultimate hustlers do that. So that's what this is all about. I got to ask, do you know how many cold calls you made in your career?
Yeah, so we've been doing it I started at the beginning of 2021, probably about 3 years, but we've only been full-time to business for like a year, because before we were like all around being a realtor and stuff. But when I stopped cold calling after 2 years, I'd probably ask someone if they consider an offer on their home, probably like over 20,000 people, like 23,000 people. But then since then, I've had a bunch of sales conversations. So I bet it's got to be like 30 at this time. Now I'm talking to less people per day, but I mean, it's tens of thousands.
What has been the most surprising thing that's ever happened to you on a cold call?
I mean, I've had it all. I've been called every name that you could think of in the book, every swear word, literally everyone. The most surprising thing that's ever happened on a call, I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. But I would say the biggest thing about making cold calls, one of the biggest benefits, is your ability to speak and think on the fly. Helps you so much with sales. And I think one of the biggest questions I get is, well, Jake, how'd your flow get so good on the phone? All these things, like, you must have some secret sauce. It's like, you know what the secret sauce is? 20,000 calls. That's the secret sauce. It's like, if you do anything for 20,000 times, it would be unreasonable for you not to be good.
Yeah, somebody said that they wish that they would have kept more detailed records of their cold calls to then call the people back like 8 years later or 5 years later, whatever it is, when it gets better, being like, either never tell them that they spoke before, or like, that's a great bit. Hey, I don't know if you remember, we spoke 8 years ago and I was terrible. And then you could just, because
just go in.
It is all about the reps. It's one of the things that I love about creating social media content is, like, everybody tells you when you start, you're going to be terrible and you're going to be awkward. The only way to get past it, or to get comfortable in front of the camera, and I'm still not perfect, right? Nobody's perfect, but it's like,
yeah, no one is.
And then you look back at those old videos and you're like, man, those stink. Like, I couldn't even say too many words.
It's for anything, you're going to stink at anything. Well, people like being good at things, right? So people have a tough time getting through that initial stage of whatever you're learning, because you're going to be bad at it, because obviously you don't just start running. You have to crawl and then you walk and then you run, right? It's like anything you do, crawl, walk, run. So you got to get through that initial embarrassment stage. First of all, no one cares. Okay. Really, no one cares. Secondly, you just got to get through that and trudge through that. And you'll start to get good. And then once you start to get good, you'll like it more. I think like Jordan Peterson talks about it or something, but, or I forget who it was, but there's a certain level. Oh, you know who it was? Robert Greene. Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. He does some other things. But he said, like, whether you're doing an instrument or whatever, you reach a certain level of mastery, like the 3 to 5 year mark, where you start to get into a groove, right? Because you're actually good at it, you're enjoying it, you're having fun, and that's when you actually like doing it, whether it's playing an instrument or doing business or whatever it is, right? But you got to be able to trudge through it for a few years of not being great, and then you get to that point where it's actually fun to do what you're doing because you're good.
and you got to keep hustling through it.
Yeah.
Jake, we got to get together. Do you ever come to New York, or I'm going to have to come down to Florida?
New York. No, I don't really go to New York. I live up in New Hampshire, but yeah, if you're ever down in Florida, dude, St. Pete's, it's a phenomenal place. I highly recommend it. St. Petersburg and Tampa. If anyone wants to move down here, all the locals probably hate me for saying this because there's too many people moving here.
One of my closest friends lives down there. He was a guest on this podcast, David Carruthers. He was on this podcast. He's a big Tampa guy.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm from like such a rural area in New Hampshire that anything was better than that. Just from a business perspective, right? I can come down here, I can network, I can meet people, do the things.
Come to New York for a week. Come to New York for a week. You'll be on like overdrive.
Yeah, I know.
You'll be stopping people on the street. We got to make it happen. So we got to make it happen. Wow, time flies. I'm going to listen to this episode personally multiple times because gems, gold, fire. Thank you for being here. You're like, as I said in the beginning, everybody needs to follow your content because your content is killer. It's inspired me. Whether you're in the real estate business or not, there's just a lot of good stuff there that can be implemented across all industries and across all career journeys. So really, really, really thank you for being here, Jake.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime I can come on, like I said, I love doing this, getting on and just talking about mindset. It just gets me fired up. So happy to do it.
100%. So we have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests, and it can't be one that you already said because I warned you before that I was going to ask you this, to leave us with their favorite or most timely motivational, inspirational quote and what it means to them. So Jake, the floor is yours.
I like this quote. You don't have to be a champion to get you don't have to be a champion to get started, but you have to get started to be a champion. Sorry, I butchered that, but you don't have to be a champion to get started, but you got to get started to be a champion. So I think that falls right in line with hustling, but and back to the other point of you got to crawl, walk, then run, right? You're not going to start out running, but you got to start.
100%. And by the way, not to jump into my wife's area of expertise, but she's a pediatric occupational therapist, and she actually says that when you look at child development, we talk about this as business development all the time, that when you look at child development, when people skip milestones, it actually hurts them in the long run. So same kind of thing. If someone were to get up and just walk one day, the kids that don't crawl, they miss it. So same thing. If you want to be a champion, you got to get started. You got to put in the work. You got to keep hustling because that will give you the greatest foundation to see that long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and on that, 20,000 cold calls. And what's going to enhance that though is get around people who are doing the thing that you're doing, right? Entrepreneurship's a tough field to be in, especially if you're younger, in your 20s, you got parents, go get a real job, do all these things. Get around people who know your struggles and they're going to pull you up through the mud and you guys are just going to be on a rocket ship.
I love it. Jake Burhans, thank you for being here.
Absolutely, man.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good. And of course, and always, keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.